Good morning. How do I turn this in? Good morning. Before I begin, let me say that it's absolutely a pleasure to be here. And ironically, as you see, my title of this presentation is Getting Here from There, a pragmatic discussion on the importance of mentoring and coaching in the athletic training profession throughout your career. And I chose that, and it's apropos, even as I return here to the Valley 40 years after I left. My wife and I moved here, actually, we lived in McAllen, went to work at FAR, and we got here in 1977. Only stayed a year, but literally 40 years ago right now, more or less, we took off and took the long road to the NATA meeting in Las Vegas through El Paso in a car. And then from Vegas through Wayne, Nebraska, and drove from Wayne, Nebraska back to New York City, where somewhere along the line we found out we got a job to move to Smiley in Houston. And what I'd like to do is talk with you a little bit, not only in the big picture about mentoring, but share some of my story a little bit, because in fact, my story is unique to me, but the big picture, I'm sure, will fit for you also. So my career started here in the Valley, and it was rather touching when we flew in Friday. Last time I drove across Farm to Market Road 100, it was 2 lanes. Some of you can recall, you used to be able to pull over to the side of the road, and right there was the water, and it was really a unique place. As a matter of fact, when I interviewed for my job at PSJA, I stayed here. They put me up, instead of putting me up in FAR or in McAllen, they put me up here on South Padre Island in what was then the Holiday Inn. I'm sure that was not this facility, and somewhere along the line the franchise has changed. But I think it's important to understand and to relate to your personal history on how you got here today, not just because you came down 77 ultimately and across 100 and on South Padre Island, but how did you get here personally and professionally? There's an old African proverb that says it takes a village to raise a child. I think it's important for you to understand that that's true also when it comes to creating a professional. It takes a village of professionals to create the man or woman that you are here today. The fact that you would spend the time, and I have to give you guys credit, that you would all spend time diligently on Friday and then yesterday to maintain your continuing education. I want to thank the organizers in particular of this particular meeting, because I'm here, again, because in a way of not the most common definition of mentoring, but because while I was working at PSJA, there was a sophomore volleyball student who I had no clue I was influencing. And she's sitting in the back of the room, Maria Thompson in particular. Maria's in back, and what I recall about her is anywhere I would go, she would follow. Okay, and she would play, and I do recall that she asked a lot of questions, but unfortunately, I didn't get to understand the type of influence that one school year had on her, and ultimately, years later, after I left Texas, moved to Washington, D.C., and I don't even remember where it was. It might have been at a SWATA meeting. She walks up to me, and she says, "Dr. Walters, I'm Maria. I was a volleyball player and a high school student at PSJA the 1 year you were there, and I'm an athletic trainer today because of your influence." And even as I begin and we go over and talk about this, there's another story, and both of these stories almost brought tears to my eyes. Brad Dixon is sitting right there. Last year we were at SWATA, and I come back to Texas because I spent the first third of my career here, starting, as I said, here in the Valley. And Brad, I was walking through, it was the last day of the meeting, we were eating breakfast, and he walked up and he said, "Excuse me, Dr. Walters, do you have a moment? Can I talk with you?" Something to that effect. And I said, "Yes, sir." He introduced himself. And a similar story. He said, "You know, I'm a graduate of Texas A&M, and oh, by the way, I'm sorry, as a good Aggie, I'm sure I look like every Aggie you ever imagined, I forgot to say howdy." Okay? Well, Brad walked up to me and he said, "You may not recall who I am, sir, but I took your course, PE 318 at Texas A&M, and I'm an athletic trainer today because of the influence that you had starting in that class." And I literally that day, he doesn't know this, but I went and I sat down and I was pretty well floored. I had no idea. So one of the things we're going to try to remind you of, whether it's active or, oh, by the way, just happenstance, mentoring is an important part. And I show that picture to you because that was me probably in the early 70s with our group of athletic trainers, and even in the 70s, we could see that athletic training was moving to a large number of women. We didn't realize it then, but like all healthcare professions, the majority of the individuals working in the profession are women in healthcare. One of the individuals there is actually the track coach, the guy in the back. But I'm here today because of this gentleman. You may have heard that one of the awards I received was the Bill Chisholm Ethnic Diversity Professional Service Award. This is Bill Chisholm. And we have that Professional Service Award at the NATA given from the EDAC because during my chairmanship, the committee and I realized that there are many men and women in our profession doing things in many places and serving and providing service and care to underserved populations. Or they are themselves men and women of color, and in those days, in the late 80s, early 90s, had yet to be recognized for their work. And I'm here because this guy took time, this gentleman, he's no longer with us though, but he took time to recognize some things in me and many other men and women that I did not recognize in myself. I was just a guy kind of trying to find his way. If we had more time, I'd almost mess around and tell you the long story short that me getting from there to here also includes the fact that I'm an adopted child, biracial child born in Munich, Germany, whose birth mother, fortunately I had the chance to meet, almost decided that post-World War II with a brown baby that she couldn't make it, we couldn't make it, and she told a story where she was averted from jumping in the river and committing suicide. So I'm here today because a woman decides not to commit suicide. And because I meet a person who saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself, that I had potential, and then kind of found me and guided me and stayed with me all the way up to his deathbed. And so I think it's important for you to understand, one of the things Bill Chisholm would say is you just never know. You don't know what a person's going to be. Now, how many of you, I'll raise my hand first, have ever seen a kid come through and you go, "But this kid's really," you shake your head and you have no clue. And short of the fact that many of you are educators also, you don't want to say something out loud about negative about a child and say, "Oh, this kid, forget it. They're trouble." We might keep that to ourselves. But in fact, we had many people, matter of fact, the way in which some of you were raised professionally, I'm sure Bill Chisholm's way in the athletic training room wouldn't work. The door was open for every and anybody. And if you hung in there back in the days when the internship route to certification was still going, it was something where if you hung in there, he gave you time. He was interested sincerely in you. And so somewhere along the line, over the course of my career, I began to realize that I internalized many of the things and many of the qualities that he gave me regarding this. And over the years in my work in our profession at the district and national level within the NATA, I guess somewhere along the line, mentoring became part of what I do and have become known for. So as we look at this discussion, and let's take an overview of the big picture of why it's important. Athletic trainers. We clearly always think of ourselves as compassionate and caring folks. If you went online, and I love the Valley Athletic Trainers Association Facebook page, I'm a member. I love seeing the things that you post during Athletic Training Month. Clearly, we see messages amongst ourselves and out to the world that tell the world we are compassionate and caring folks. Okay. Now, one thing's for sure. Tom Woods and I have something in common. We came to the state of Texas back in the day when, after a while, it was like, uh-oh, these Indiana State folks coming to Texas. What's going on? There was a time where it was like there was a train that left Terre Haute, Indiana, and came right down to the state of Texas. Before I continue, one of the things I want to do is say, in those days, the train kept coming, but when I got here, in particular, a couple of years in front of Tom, when I got to the Valley, there were only 3 other men in those days who I am aware of, and I met one of them yesterday morning coming in, and he was here when I got here. Of course, the person we all know, most of you didn't have the chance to meet or work with, but I did, and he mentored me even during that first year, Larry Lohr from McAllen High School. Then there was Raul Zamaripa, and of course, Larry Brunt in Brownsville. I showed up, and then a classmate of mine, I don't know if the athletic trainer from Weslaco was here, but the first athletic trainer at Weslaco High School was Tim Wacker, a classmate of mine. And we were the 5 athletic trainers that I know of in the Valley in 1977. Okay, well, suffice to say that the professional preparation for all of us from the time that Larry Lohr came about and started working to the time that Tim and I and some of you came through has changed. We've gone from, and I professionally and personally am a product of both the internship route to certification as well as the educational graduate education program at Indiana State. So we've seen that change. Okay? We know that all of you have spent hours upon hours upon hours gaining the requisite knowledge, skills, and abilities to do the job that you're trained to do on a daily basis in maintaining the health, safety, and well-being of the athletes in your school systems. Okay? You have, and this weekend, you've listened to a number of speakers on a wide array of topics, and all of you have one thing in common. At the very least, you have a keen awareness of the population of your patients, okay? Not only as secondary school athletes, or those of you who do work in collegiate athletics, but regionally. You know the makeup of your athletes from their communities. You probably live next door to several of them. They're in your subdivision or in your community. So you bring that unique focus. Well, along with that, the reason you came here this weekend was because you know that you have to maintain your competence in the profession of athletic training. And it doesn't matter if that means that it's because, and I think the acronym has changed, but to maintain your license as an LAT here in the state of Texas, or if it's both your license and your NATA certification. You know that continued competence is absolutely critical to the ongoing success and safety, your personal and professional success and the safety of your athletes. So, everyone who in here, even who in here has been mentored by someone? May I see a show of hands? Okay. Almost everyone. Almost everyone. How many of you are maintaining that relationship at this time? Okay, less, but more than I might have expected. But normally what happens is we're blessed, we pass our state board or the BOC, and man, like me, I got on the train and I'm going to be interviewed by Julio Ayala, the head coach and athletic director at PSJA, and dadgummit, that's a Texas word, right? Dadgummit, I learned that here in Texas. It's swearing without swearing. I came here and I was getting a job. Now, I didn't know doo-doo from Shinola, right? And Shinola is a place in Texas. I love saying these things when I'm up north. People go, what? Okay. But we go off, we're excited, we get our jobs, and sometimes and somewhere along the way, we forget how important this mentoring thing really is. Okay? And one thing's for sure. How many of you have taken either an undergraduate course or a graduate course in mentoring and or leadership? Show of hands. Yeah, even fewer. So rarely are we taught about this. And oh, by the way, had I really been paying attention when Natalie asked me, was this a evidence-based practice presentation or not, if I had really been paying attention, dadgummit, you could have got another EBP, because in fact, while it's qualitative research, and my title is Pragmatism, that's, if you know me, I just want to know, well, how are we going to get that done, right? Well, it turns out that what we'll be talking about, in fact, is referenced and comes from the literature. It's qualitative in nature, okay, which sometimes people have a problem with, but it's there, and it's truly there in our medical literature. So you haven't, for the most part, the majority of you, I think I saw 2 hands go up, haven't been taught formally about this in your education. Okay? And what I'd like to do when we finish this morning is introduce to you, not only to remind you about the importance of mentoring, but to help you begin to think about and be mindful of how mentoring can assist you throughout your career in both your maintenance of certification and even looking forward into where you are going to be and how you're going to get there in your career, wherever there is, from here. Okay? With that being said, there are some objectives, and hopefully they'll be met at the end of this presentation. I'd like you to be able to describe the attributes of a successful mentor. And before I even move on, as I'm talking, not that I don't want you to listen to and to hang on to every word, because even I believe that, what I have to say is important. Brad sat through it a whole semester, and he survived. What I'd like you to start thinking about is, on a piece of paper right there at your side, to just write down, what are the qualities and attributes that you think a mentor should have and that you would expect of him or her? But I also want you to think about what are the qualities and attributes of a mentee, the person who is going to be mentored. What should they have? And we'll go through that, okay? I want you to appreciate, and hopefully you will, appreciate the need to assist others by serving as a mentor to a young professional or colleague. But we need to not only deal with young professional, but with a colleague. And I can tell you, here I am in my 42nd year as an athletic trainer, licensed and certified, and I can tell you that I still have a mentor, okay? I have gone through a few, and that's just a natural progression, but I think even the most learned, and there's probably somebody in this room who's a day or two older than I am, even the eldest person in the room still may need a mentor, okay? And hopefully you can analyze and reflect on your own personal and professional needs, as well as then begin to develop a plan to establish an appropriate mentor-protege relationship throughout your career. So it's not one and done. It's not I'm out, I'm finished, or I'm working on my administrator certificates. You know, there are a lot of things that you need to think about for the entire time of your career. How many of you know the story of the word mentor, the history? Anyone know Greek mythology? In fact, the word mentor comes from, how many of you read the Odyssey in high school? Oh. Right? Odysseus went off to fight the war, and he had a son, Telemachus. And in fact, fortunately, he had a friend whose name was Mentor. And Mentor stayed and guided and advised his son through youth into early adulthood while Odysseus was gone and out there. Okay? So there's a deep-rooted history to this word. It didn't just show up. It's not created. Oh, those of you who are millennials in here, it's not a word that was created by those darn baby boomers. Okay? Yeah, we created most things in the world, but we didn't create that. No. Okay? So there's a lot to this when you think about a mentor. Okay? And in fact, it's a story that can continue to assist us in understanding the professional and personal needs for guidance and assistance even in today's world. Okay? Doesn't play real well, but a mentor is someone who is a trusted advisor. Okay? And that's not only in schools. It can be, of course, it's in public schools, colleges, universities, but also in the workplace. Okay? One of the folks whose work I read describes mentoring, as you see there, as a process whereby an experienced, highly regarded, empathetic mentor guides another individual in the development and, importantly, and re-examination of their own ideas, learning, and personal and professional development. Okay? And again, re-examination. So it's a guiding process, and it's continual, it's dynamic, and over time. So all weekend, you've been learning a lot about how to care for others. This is also a conversation about caring for others, other professionals, but I want you to also internalize it and think about caring for yourself when you begin to formalize, at least mentally, your own plan. There is a ton of literature, medical literature, talking about mentoring in academic medical settings. The majority of the literature is, in fact, in the nursing world. I've selected primarily a couple of studies for time's sake that come out of medicine per se, and Sam Bujak and his colleagues did performed two particular bodies of work that I, in preparation, thought that they served really well. So in 2006, they took a look at all the literature they could find talking about mentoring in medicine. And then in 2010 went back, this is the classic, well, let's redo it, just kind of twist it a little bit. But then they went back and they looked at it from a qualitative perspective. And what they did was kind of interesting, okay? They defined mentoring as a complex relationship based on mutual interest, both professional and personal, okay? Clearly important. And they identified 5 major themes, okay? First, and where I just asked you to kind of think about that, and hopefully you've written some of these down, but we'll go through each of the 5 in the big picture and then individually. What are the desired characteristics and actions of both the mentor and the mentee? Okay? How do we start this thing? Is it just happenstance, chicken or the egg? Do I walk up, excuse me, sir, would you be my mentor? I guess it could be, okay? What's the structure? How do we develop it? What are the characteristics of the relationship once it develops? And, or realistically, it doesn't always work out well. Hopefully for most of you it has, and it will. But what are the barriers to mentoring? Are there dysfunctional mentoring relationships? Yes. And what are some possible solutions? Okay, so here we go. Let's start with the person who's going to be mentored. What are some of their characteristics? Well, first and foremost, they got to want to be. Okay, they got to decide they want to be mentored, and in the real world, they should take the initiative. Now, pragmatically, I've mentioned to you that this has been an important part of my career. When I was a young neophyte, I didn't have a clue. I didn't even know I needed to be mentored. So I didn't fit that first one, okay? But if you're in tune, and I can tell you this, as I've pointed out a couple of folks already and thrown them under the bus, this meeting represents a lot of things to me. But Darryl Conway, who you listened to twice yesterday, Darryl was one of my mentees. Not because I went looking for it, but literally, he's a guy who did just that. He picked up the phone when I was in Washington, D.C. He said, hello, may I speak to Dr. Frank Walters? Yes, this is he who's calling. Introduced himself and just flat out told me that he'd like to come up. He was an undergraduate student at the University of Delaware. Said he'd like to come up. He's from Prince George's County, Maryland, surrounding community in D.C., and would like to come up and visit with me to talk about his future and the big picture of his career. Sure, come on up. Last night we were out to dinner, and I had to ask him to remind me how this started. Now, one of the things he reminded me of, and you just got to know Darryl, he is a forward-thinking individual. I was really setting up the fact that I might potentially need a job, and figure if I got to know you, that might get the in, okay? So the mentee, ideally, should take the initiative to start this practice, okay? But they need to be committed and passionate about it. We talk about it all the time. As a matter of fact, I think during NATA month, there were some things, initiatives going on, and they kept asking people, please don't use passionate to describe athletic training and how we are. We use that word a lot. But in this situation, the mentee needs to really be committed. So we'll take passionate out, but we know what that means, okay? They want it to happen. They want it to work, okay? And they got to be willing to learn, okay? It's critically important. Now, believe it or not, this would be a very mature mentee to understand that you don't take everybody's advice. In fact, even in selecting a mentor, you need to be selective. It doesn't always work, okay? And so they've got to think about what is it they want, what are they looking to do, where are they going to go, and who is it that might be best to help me in achieving my goals, okay? And then, once you select a mentor, you got to be willing to face up to the fact that we're not as good as what we think we can do as we want to be, okay? That we have problems that we have to address, that we've got weaknesses, even though the mentor is there to pump us up and get us ready and to encourage us. A good mentor will do what? They'll shoot straight, okay? And there will be things that they will have to tell us that we're inadequate at. But if they're a good mentor, they'll help us get through that. Okay, so now let's take a look at the qualities of a mentor. How many of you had already written some of these things down? I don't There we go. Thank you. I don't want to forget that I asked you to do something, the good educator. Hell, he asked me to write these things down, and he never kind of asked me if I had that. Okay? So, how about the qualities and characteristics of a mentor? So, the first one would be something, my wife's here in the room. I'm often skeptical about doing presentations with her here. God bless her. But she's going to say, I might be understanding, but patient, I'm not. Or she might say to me, how come you don't treat me like the people who you mentor or the folks who work with you? Is that correct? So a mentor needs to be patient, right? Think about yourself when you were green, when you first started, okay? Piece of work, right? How are we going to make something out of us? Any of us. I didn't have a clue. It's amazing. As a matter of fact, as we raised our children, some of the things that I did, I wouldn't even consider allowing my child to do. And, you know, like something as simple as, oh, you want to go to college? Yeah. How do you do that? Where do I get the application? The initiative initially wasn't there. The desire was there, but a lot of things took time. They need to be honest and trustworthy. I kind of alluded to that. Okay. How many of you are in leadership positions at your job? You have others who report to you, and sometimes you have to deliver news that's not always the best. I've had a situation where I've had in my most recent position, at one point in time, over 200 people reporting to me. And there were times, while that's a little different relationship, many of the employees who worked with me, I wound up mentoring, particularly the athletic trainers. But there were times, and there are times, where, if, for example, you have to be so brutally honest that you have to let someone know, you're going to be successful, I'm confident, but it's not just going to be here. Help them be successful somewhere else. You might call that firing them. I just call it help them find some other opportunity, okay? That's not necessarily the mentoring per se, but brutally honest without being harsh is an important characteristic, okay? Trustworthy, reliable, and accessible. How many of you have ever had that situation where you made an appointment with someone who you respected and you were looking for their advice, their input, and you show up and they're not there? Anybody ever had that happen? And then okay, anything can happen. I get it. And you say, let's do it again. And it happens again. Ever have that happen? Is that the way a mentoring relationship should be? I don't think so. Okay? So the mentor has to be committed his or herself. Okay? And they need to be there. And they need to be accessible. Okay? Without a doubt, it's about the mentee. It's not about the mentor. It's about helping that mentee identify what it is they're looking to do and helping them explore ways in which to reach their goals. Okay? So that's an important quality of the mentor. And it should always be in the best interest of the mentee. That's no different than your patients in your athletic training facility, in your clinic, right? It's what's best for them. And there are times where we discuss with them things that they've got this idea, they're looking in the mirror, and it's not what they see, okay? Or what they're looking at and what they want to do, it's not working, okay? So we've got to help them. Well, how do we start this relationship? How's it done? How's it begun? In my case, it starts because my wife, smarter than me, sends me to go see the athletic trainer because I've broken my ankle and I need to be cared for. and I don't have a clue. I think I want to play in those days, even at college, at Brooklyn College, they had a JV basketball team. And in I go into the athletic training room, and here I am today. Okay? Was that formal? No. But I was the guy who was open to the way in which it was delivered. Well, it can be done in a couple of ways, formally, or, as I've probably described, self-selection, and there's positives and negatives to both of those, okay? How many of you were assigned during your athletic training education to an older student? Anyone remember that, where you were a level 1 or, you were a freshman and you had a sophomore or a junior working with you, okay? Now, that fits in here as formal, but it also fits as peer, and we'll talk about that. But you weren't given a choice. And just knowing human beings, if you weren't given a choice, sometimes, I don't like that. How come I can't find out? My boy is over here. I don't like that person. I don't like the way they wear their hat. Or some silly something, right? So that's one way. Probably not the one that works the best, okay? Or the one, it's not fail-proof, but self-identification, finding someone. It turns out that I kind of even had a hybrid of that when I got into it, and Bill Chisholm kept talking to me. His technique really was to engage me, and he didn't just care for my broken ankle, even though I wasn't an athlete, right? So that's a whole nother question, but I walk in, and he just engages me and asks me questions. Next thing you know, he's asking me about, do I know what's down there? And I go, yeah, it's an ankle. No. What's it made of? And then I go and I look, and I get information, and I come back, and I'm ready to answer that question, and he'll ask another question. It's like, damn. And find out he never asked the same question. He's not going to ask that question again. But I'm foolish enough, fortunately, to seek the answer, okay? But in the process, he assigns me to a senior student who ultimately became an air traffic controller, right? But that's fine. That's fine. I looked at him, and he seemed to really know it. Bob Pace was his name. He seemed to really be like, wow, I want to be like that. And between the two of them, they kept my interest and really developed the fire that I needed to begin to succeed. So, again, it can be done either way. Okay, now, how do we structure this? This is where the literature starts to tell you it can get dicey. Okay? As a matter of fact, these authors found that this was the most important factor of all, okay? That the sensitivity of the mentor was found to be the most important factor than any other matching factor in both of their studies. And right off of the top, we know that gender, race, and ethnicity come into play, okay? There's no way around it, and it doesn't have to be a hindrance, but it's not automatically a key to success. I can tell you as a man of color that at the time it didn't make sense to me, and I didn't really consciously become aware of it, but I walked into an athletic training room that was so different in many ways than any other athletic training room I'd ever been into that it didn't even dawn on me that at the time I was being mentored by an African-American male, a person of color who looked just like me, who had experiences similar to me. And we come to find out that that's an important factor for many individuals, that they want to be mentored by someone who looks like them, who has an experience and background similar to them. And oh, by the way, we know, as it says, the literature that and their results in all the work that they did and that they found, women respond better in the big picture, and this is in medicine per se, but I guarantee you that I don't think it's any different across professions in healthcare. Women respond better when they are mentored by women, and then if we add ethnicity and race to it, they do better when they are mentored by women who look like them. Maria, I don't know how she chose me. I'm not a woman, and I'm not from the Valley originally, okay? But somewhere along the line, she decided that that was good enough, and I would assume that if we ask her, that she found someone who cared about her like she is and wanted to help her, okay? But it's important to understand that we can be mentored by others. As we move along, particularly if we think of this as a continuum, that might be how we start. But it doesn't necessarily have to be how it continues along the way. Because early on, you're young, you're excited, but you're probably a little timid or nervous about being involved with somebody else, and you've got to bridge that gap. And when we finally boil it all down and find that we're people and that we're in a profession, in this case athletic training, where we all care about people and that ultimately that's what we want to do, some of those barriers break down. But it's really important. And we find much of this to be true regardless of the healthcare profession. Okay? The relationship itself, ultimately what I'm talking about is the fact that it's personal. This isn't esoteric nonsense. Okay? This is about people connecting to people. And in fact, what do we know athletic trainers do and do well? What do we know? They're people pleasers. For the most part, athletic trainers will bend over backwards to do for others, even when it's to the detriment of themselves and or their own relationships. Okay? How many of you would agree with that? Okay? Don't ask me how we do this, but we end up doing it. Okay? So it's about connecting to people. And that's critically important. Think about it, as it says here, develop based on professional and personal interest, and both individuals begin to appreciate each other as a person. With time, that person who you are looking up to as a deity, almost, as somebody superhuman, wow, you see that they have frailties. And I can tell you, and my wife will tell you, I would go places with Bill Chisholm. One of the things I found out, and I guess it's true when I go to a lot of meetings around, I picked up this habit, I don't know. When we walked across campus, oh God, don't be in a hurry. Hey, bro, how you doing? That's Bill. He stopped, he talked with everybody. Oh, you got that problem? Come on by and see me. Now, there's not a lot of you who know mentors or other athletic trainers that would do that, but he got out across campus. He knew everyone. Everyone knew him, and he couldn't get anywhere. Man, I only got an hour for lunch, Bill. I got to be back to class. Oh, baby, don't worry about it. We'll be all right. Okay? We'll be all right. So it's a people connection that we're dealing with. Okay? So, in the relationship itself, here's what we're looking at in terms of values. We've touched on them. Honesty, trust. You got to believe that the things you're saying to this individual, they'll hold on to. And only share if with others, if you've allowed them to, granted them permission, or if there's really a need for you for them to do better by them doing so. Mutual respect. Without a doubt, the mentee is typically looking up to his or her mentor. But ultimately, you know, it's not this any longer. We're both looking at each other from the same level, okay? Open communication, and I alluded to confidentiality. But there are going to be times where the mentor is going to speak with his or her colleagues and peers because there's a need that you have that someone else can assist you with. And so you trust that you've shared with them these concerns, and that in fact, when they see the opportunity, they talk to somebody about it, okay? In fact, just recently, last week, I was in New York City, and I went to Brooklyn College commencement because another one of our Brooklyn College graduates, who is now the head athletic trainer for the New York Knicks, Roger Hines, 1 year behind me at Indiana State and Brooklyn College, he received the Distinguished Alumnus Award. That's a pretty big deal for an athletic trainer. We've had thousands of graduates, and he was handpicked by the president of Brooklyn College to receive this award for work he's done not only with the team, but with graduates. And he said a couple of things in his couple of minutes speech, and one was that Bill became our surrogate father. Now, both of us had fathers, and I'm not going to stand up here and tell you that, oh, my father was a deadbeat dad. He wasn't. But we didn't have the greatest relationship. Same is true with Roger. But Bill became the guy who we confided in, who we could share anything with. One of the things he would tell both of us was to go on and go get our master's degree. So, bam, I went to Indiana State, and that was because he had sent somebody else in front of me. And then after I went, for 11 years straight, Brooklyn College graduates were in every class. You had some Brooklyn College graduates in your class, Tom, okay? And he, in my case, knew that my wife and I were connected. We got married, and what I didn't know, this is a little sidebar, we got married on his birthday, ironically. We didn't even know. We invited him to the wedding, the whole 9 yards. He was there. He never once even told me it was his birthday. But what he had shared with me early on was, okay, your wife, Anne-Marie, will probably follow you anywhere you go, but one thing you got to do, you got to make sure she finishes her education. Okay? So we went back to Indiana State. I don't even know if that was the year you were there, Tom. It was that summer. I spent the summer at Indiana State. She was in class. I had nothing better to do. Where did I go? To the athletic training room. Okay? And we hung out there. But he knew just about everything about us, okay, and was willing to take that on, and we trusted him, okay? And again, the relationship, I guess it feels selfish when you think about what I'm saying if you're the mentee looking at it over the years, but it's about helping this person, okay? And this is very formal. I can't tell you I knew what my expectations were, but he helped create whoever the professional is that I am. But you eventually should talk about the expectations, okay? But there are some problems, okay? And they do crop up, okay? There are times, and I don't know if you can think about any of your colleagues, particularly going back to school. This one is a little easier to identify there. Think about your classmates in your cohort who couldn't take the criticism. I can think of a couple of people, as a matter of fact, I won't name them because that wouldn't be appropriate, but my last name starts with W, so even in graduate school, I was like the last dude to get checked off on any number of things. And I used to be able to watch, and somebody would say, in my day, Dr. Bob Benke was the primary graduate instructor. It was before Ken Knight. But he'd criticize somebody on a technique of whatever. And the person would always go, and they're making some excuse out loud. Always got to correct why it wasn't right. And it's like, oh, yeah, well, I knew how to do that, but. And even though that doesn't normally happen out in the open, it's tough in this business, right, when you're a student, when you're young, to understand, no, you didn't do that right. And when you think about why we have to be so tough on each other, it's because we got people's lives in our hands and their care. But The mentee has to be able to face up to their inadequacies and understand that just because you're short today doesn't mean you're going to be short forever. And, oh, by the way, you're not going to be good at everything. All right? Not at all. So that's one concern. They don't make the changes as needed. And every now and then, the mentor that you've selected is a dud. Anybody had that? He or she's not here. You can raise your hand. I won't tell. Okay, at least one hand. Okay, so it just doesn't work. It doesn't work. Think about it. You don't get along with everybody. I'll tell you a secret. All black people don't get along. Okay? So, just because I select a mentor who might look like me and know my background and come from my neighborhood, don't mean that we all get along. Okay? So, I do that. I have an employee who a former employee, who I can tell you we are in this type of relationship. We're friends, but he looks at me as a mentor. And one of the things he loves to tell me, early on he didn't get it. He said, Doc, why is everything black and white to you, man? Every time you come up, you always talk about, I said, man, that's the world I live in. Okay? It's not going to hold us back, but I want you to see things from another perspective. Okay? And I would hope you can appreciate something I learned by working here in the Valley only 1 year. And I would hope this has changed. And I drew a deep appreciation for the migrant worker. Okay? I could not, for the life of me, understand how young men and young women could get a good education and get out of that cycle of migrant work. Understand why their family might be in it at the time when you get to school in November and you leave in March. Gosh, that bothered me. I would have never, ever understood that situation had I not worked here at PSJA. I understand the need economically for families to earn a living, but how do you get them out of that? That's another sociological issue. But it's the idea of understanding people and their plight that help you, and you've got to make the right choice of a mentor. Okay? Well, relations again. If the mentee, the person who's this is all about, isn't getting what they want and the mentor is blowing them off, it's not going to work if they're rejected. Okay? It just doesn't work. Now, again, race, gender, ethnicity, it's not a guarantee for success. Okay? It will work better potentially, but as I said, we don't all get along. Okay? There are some unscrupulous individuals. During my terms, or during my 2 terms on the board of directors of the BOC, I had the unfortunate task of serving on the disciplinary committee of the BOC. And for the first 2 years, that was one of my assignments. In those 2 years, I found out that every athletic trainer is not a benevolent soul. And in fact, in both years, we decertified a few people for terrible, terrible things. Okay? And I bring that up to say that, oh, by the way, we're living in the Me Too age right now. Okay? I don't know of any, personally, mentors who have abused their mentees, but we do know of mentors who academically will have the GA mentee do the work, and all of a sudden their name's not on the paper. They're not on the presentation. Or they're guiding the graduate student through his or her research, and while the graduate student does their presentation, later on somewhere that work has been reconfigured and it's purely the mentor's work. That's wrong. Okay? So everyone's not the benevolent soul. One of the things I love to say, right, wrong, or indifferent, is that athletic training is a microcosm of society. So you name it, we got it. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Okay? And that's true even here, but that's not what this is intended about. It's at the very least something we need to be cognizant of. Okay? Ultimately, it's potentially possible for any number of reasons that the relationship just stops working. Okay? So, this group boil it all down to say this. They say that successful mentoring requires commitment, good interpersonal skills on both sides, and an environment that enhances the whole thing. Okay? Well, there are a bunch of ways that mentoring is done also. I realize, like Darryl said yesterday, I'm the last person, at least in terms of CE-wise, between you and hitting 100 to get to the house. So I'll get there for you. But you can have more than one mentor at a time. Okay? You have more than one friend. Well, I don't. No. I don't know if more than one person will admit to being my friend, but you have more than one friend. Professionally, you may have more than one interest, and so you might have multiple mentors. There are also networks per se. When you tie into individuals, and I'll say this, I don't think Brad or Maria realized this, but what they just got today was a lesson that, and I just came up with this concept, I haven't read it, and maybe one day I'll do more on it, but there is what I would call a professional tree that we all have, just like we have a family tree. And oh, by the way, they only for the first time got to see a picture of the guy who influenced me, who ultimately, I guess, I influenced them, Bill Chisholm. So your progeny on the tree of athletic training of Bill Chisholm, okay? And that's part of what you get from your mentor, okay? And there are formal networks. Now, then there's mutual mentoring, back and forth, where two people will help each other for particular needs, okay? I mentioned peer mentoring. Again, Roger Hines, the head athletic trainer for the New York Knicks, he stood up in front of 4,000 graduates who were wanting him to get the heck out of the way so that they could throw their hats up and go party at graduation last week. But he said to the world, and I don't think I realized it at the time, that I was his peer mentor. A quick story about that. He wanted to become an athletic trainer, and he clearly articulated, not like I did, but he clearly articulated to Bill Chisholm and then to Dr. Bob Benke at Indiana State that he wanted to be an athletic trainer in the NBA. And here we are. He was the head athletic trainer for the Dallas Mavericks, as well as now the New York Knicks. He worked for a time with the Atlanta Hawks. But to get there, this family, this peer mentoring, my wife and I owned when we first came to the Valley, and as a matter of fact, we had a 1974 Ford Pinto. And we had the smallest U-Haul and brought our stuff to McAllen to get our apartment. But before that, we got Roger, and Roger's a little taller than I, and in those days he had hair, had a huge afro. Roger wrote in the back of our Ford Pinto from Brooklyn, New York to Terre Haute, Indiana, so that he could go on his interview at Indiana State. Okay? And we talked back and forth. We continue to talk. And peer mentoring, if it is the right person, works quite well. How many of you are still in touch with those individuals that either mentored you as a student, peer-wise, or you mentored? How many of you are still into that relationship? Sure. Okay? Works very, very well. There you go. Two gentlemen in the front. Okay? So it works well when the two folks are there. Now, here we are in the virtual world. And we typically, and we've been talking about being personal and relationship building, and we've always had phones. Bill Chisholm called me all the time. I have my doctorate today, not because I thought I was bright, but because he never had a conversation with me where he didn't say, when are you going to get your card? What? I was telling the president of Brooklyn College last week, I said, he just insisted, because she wanted to know more about this man. And I said, he just kept saying it. When are you going to get it? When are you going to get it? And then I found a way to leave Prairie View A&M University, go to Texas A&M, and it's not because I thought I was smart. Matter of fact, I used to think to have a PhD, you had to really be a brilliant individual. Well, I don't know that I fit that, but I know one thing. Dr. Homer Tolson taught me statistics, and he said the mind can conceive what the butt can endure. Okay, and so I mean I could sit through it, but I got it because Bill considered it, and the phone was always there. Well, today, I say all that to say that today we have some really cool tools. Okay, as we were getting on the plane, this lady the other day was at 5:30 in the morning on Friday morning, and she's doing a FaceTime call or a Skype call to some friend in loud, and it's like, golly, and do we all have to see that? But I say that to say that you can do it through social media and or technology. Okay, you may want to identify, somebody in here we had the discussion on concussions, somebody might want to really connect with Dr. Kamansky or with Kevin Guskowitz at North Carolina. You send them an email and or Skype, and you can have conversations like we're in the same room. So it can be done cross-country, around the world even, with tools that we have today. Okay? Now, this gentleman, Turner, talks about this as being a dynamic process. And it continues into the workforce, and this now comes to those of you who are supervising other athletic trainers, okay? He is from the majority population, but takes time to notice that mentoring is very helpful to those in minority groups, or those individuals from minority groups. And he talks about it as a mentoring wheel that has 4 components: the freeing up time, envisioning, implementing, and attracting. And each one he describes with a specific goal. And this wheel that turns, okay? Freeing up, that's the time the mentor nurtures and becomes supportive of the individual, okay? And helps the mentee begin to develop a sense of self. And I can tell you, when I read this, I'm going, wow, I don't know that Bill was doing this formally or intentionally, even though his master's degree was in counseling, so maybe. But I remember that. And without a doubt, it helps this freeing up, helps the mentee begin to develop a sense of, who am I? Wow, I'm a developing professional, okay? I am real in this area, okay? And then helping them to envision and develop a purpose, okay, with professional values and priorities. So it's a gradual process that goes on, and there's no one exact line of demarcation between one or the other, but it's moving and dynamic, and this envisioning stage helps them to begin to develop a sense of purpose as to, where am I going? Okay? And then he talks about helping them to implement it, assisting the individual to identify their goals and decide on how to get it done. And again, I had no clue. I can tell you this part of my story. I'm the first person in my family to finish beyond the 8th grade. Okay? Go to college? Yeah, sure. That's what. Honestly, somebody asked me, you going to college? Yeah. How are you going to do it? I don't know. How do you do it? Where do you? All these dumb questions. When I look back, boy, was I an idiot. Okay? But he helped me envision these things and helped me develop my vision. That's what the implementation stage is. And then attracting, assist the mentee to focus on their passion or heart's desire. And let me tell you, Anne-Marie, I'm going to let you all know. How many of you know a world champion personally? Well, my wife is a former, 2 years ago, she was a world champion foil fencer in her age group for the whole world, women's foil champion. She had her vision, and she spent all her hours at Brooklyn College as a fencer, number 2 as a collegiate fencer. And where was I? Rather than just sitting down watching her, I was in the athletic training room. How many of you are familiar with, and he's drawn some criticism, but with the concept of 10,000 hours to become an expert, Malcolm Gladwell, okay? 10,000 hours, that was, I have no clue. Over the time I spent, if Bill Chisholm told me to be somewhere, I was there. If the athletic training room was open, during my years, I was there. When I got to Indiana State, the same thing. But he helped me create my vision of what I wanted to be, okay? Well, we've discussed a lot about the mentor-mentee relationship, but now let's talk about it for you on your own and considering it in the long haul. Dr. Atul Gawande is a surgeon up in Boston. He writes for The New Yorker. He's also written a book that many athletic trainers should have read. If you haven't, matter of fact, on Tuesday I'll be in Tampa at University of South Florida. I teach there one day a year, and I'll be there on Wednesday to do so. Anyone ever read the Checklist Manifesto? Okay, you might want to put that on your list, written by him. Darryl Conway epitomizes what he talks about. What did Darryl say to you yesterday? If you can think about it and imagine it, you should prepare for it. He's got a checklist for everything. Well, Dr. Gawande wrote this article about personal bests, and that says top athletes and singers have coaches. Should you? Okay? So, the article, I'll read this passage and then tell you about it. His point is, elite performers, researchers say, must engage in deliberate practice, sustained, mindful efforts to develop the full range of abilities that success requires. You have to work at what you're not good at. So, in a nutshell, his article was about him being a surgeon and how after he left fellowship, he went out and in the world of big-time medicine in Boston, his infection rate was really low his first 5 to 6 years post-op. And then all of a sudden, he noticed his outcomes, his infection rate started ticking up, and it was worse than the norm. Well, he stepped back and he said, why is this happening? And ultimately what he decided to do was to bring in his former fellowship director who had retired and asked him to come in and observe him in surgery. And after that, after a time, they would discuss what went on in the surgery. And it was never that it was something terribly bad, but the little nuances of things like the surgical field needed to be a little tighter. Or, in one case, his arm was up in a position that really didn't serve well with the teamwork. His assistant needed to have that space to do stuff. And his point is, think about it. We all work with teams, right? And I know at least one person's worked at University of West Virginia here with a former D.C. public school athlete that I took care of. And we know that pro athletes have coaches. They're the best in the world. But they have a coach with them all the time. How many of you right now still have someone coaching you in your practice? Please, curb your enthusiasm. 2 people? Oh, well, what the heck is that? I'm not saying that you're not good. That's not what I'm saying. But if you want to be better, you might consider asking a colleague to critically observe, not necessarily the supervisors in here, but critically observe what you're doing and give you feedback so that you can improve on your practice. And it's the idea of being coached and or mentored across the continuum. Now, I know many of you have a job here. I'm coming towards the end. Many of you have a good job here where you are. And some of you will stay where you are, and there's no harm with that. But I can tell you in my career, I had no clue that I would have been a secondary school athletic trainer, and I think PSJ in those days was 4A, I think. then going to a historically black college and university, going up to Texas A&M, then going, then going up, Rita, another of my mentees, another situation where I go in and now I build a sports medicine program for an inner city public school system from the ground up, and then finishing my career in a hospital system where I have 25 athletic trainers who report to me. I'm the director of cardiac rehab, pulmonary rehab, diabetes education, a wellness center, and then, oh, by the way, I manage 6 orthopedic surgeons' practices. I had no clue that I would ever do that. But if there are those of you in the room who are looking to change your career, or to stay in athletic training but change how you do this, you may well realize that mentoring or being mentored and or coaching for a purpose might be what you want to do. Without a doubt, I can't say this is true for those of you who are licensed only in the state, but those of you who are younger, who are BOC certified, you will, before your career is over, recertify. What? Really? Oh my God. I don't think we're talking about you taking the BOC exam again. I think we've got that down. But you will need to develop a portfolio that shows you can perform up to standards in all of the areas in our practice analysis, and do so, of course, at minimal competency. So it behooves you to think about developing a career path, but you don't have to do it alone. For any number of reasons, it's probably smart to think about how you can do that and have someone assist you. So, what do we know? Mentoring is crucial to the professional development of an individual. It's critical. It's critical in assisting an individual in selecting a career path within any profession, much less athletic training. Okay? If, for example, you're an athletic trainer who aspires to work in a particular setting, whether it's secondary school, clinical, outreach, research, a mentoring relationship can assist you to develop a network within that professional area, and there are many ways we see that relationship can be developed and maintained. For the mentee, okay, it helps you get impartial advice and encouragement. You develop a supportive professional set of relationships. You get assistance with problem solving. You learn to be self-reflective. You learn to develop a long-range career plan and seek guidance from a mentor or coach for your career. I think that's the point I would like to drive. For your career. Not for only one short amount of time, for those of you who are now credentialed professionals, for the next thing that you want, but to the end line. The mentor. You get personal satisfaction in the career development of others. I am very proud to say that in this room, there are men and women who I've been fortunate enough that they allowed me to impact their professional lives. And as I've told you, it actually has meant so much to me. It's the world to me. It helps us improve our interpersonal communication skills. It could be the one thing that really makes your job satisfying. Sometimes we get caught in the rut of everyday stuff, and this is a beacon of light. Okay? And it helps you reflect on your professional practice and career development for your own continued development and mentoring. So, I say to all of you, reflect on your own professional practice and or career development. And I don't care if this is your last year coming up. Okay? I went at A&M, I had a classmate, George Taylor. He said something to the effect, yeah, old coach says he's been coaching 45 years, but he's been doing the same thing. He's done the same thing 45 single times. Okay? How can you do something different and improve upon what you're going to do? Okay? Identify a colleague. Seek their assistance. You're seasoned professionals for the most part, so that tough thing about, hey, would you help me, shouldn't be as tough as you think. Okay? And develop a plan with your mentor for continued professional development based on your needs. What do you want to improve upon? Where do you think your weaknesses are, and who is it that you know that can help you do that? And then, like everything else, like our emergency action plans, okay, other things that we do, we need to review and revise those plans. It may not be an annual thing. It could be and should be at a time that fits and is appropriate for you, but it's not a one-and-done type of thing. Let me say thank you. I appreciate the opportunity that you've taken your morning to be with me. Are there any questions? This was the soft stuff. Questions, comments? No, please, we're trying to go home. Thanks.